Amidst the golden sands of ancient Egypt, where the Nile wove destinies and pharaohs ruled with divine power, Princess Nefertari yearned for more than a throne. A jewel of the two lands, she was bound by golden threads of duty, promised to a destiny crafted by others, a marriage securing alliances, but not love. Yet beneath the sacred shadows of Isis, her wild, untamed heart found an echo in the eyes of a warrior. One forbidden encounter ignited a flame threatening to consume their worlds. Will she choose the gilded cage of her lineage, or the perilous freedom of a love that defies gods and men? Prepare for a saga of passion, betrayal, and a choice that will shake an empire to its core. From what corner of the world are you listening? And what, in historical romances, captures your soul the most? Leave your comment, and let's uncover the secrets of time's sands together. The year was 1324, before the birth of Christ, in the golden land of Egypt, where the mighty Nile carved its eternal path through endless sands. The reign of the boy pharaoh Tutankhamun hung by a thread as fragile as papyrus, while his regent, the powerful pharaoh struggled to maintain the delicate balance of a kingdom teetering on the edge of chaos. Dawn broke over the sacred city of Thebes like molten gold poured across the heavens, painting the limestone temples in hues of amber and rose. The air hung thick with the perfume of lotus blossoms and burning incense, while the distant sound of temple bells echoed across the sacred lake like whispered prayers to the gods. Princess Nefertari pressed her slender fingers against the cool stone of her chamber window, watching the sun's first rays dance across the waters of the Nile. At 21, she possessed a beauty that poets would immortalize in verse. Skin like burnished gold, eyes the color of honey warmed by desert sun, and hair as black as the fertile soil that gave life to Egypt. Yet beneath her ethereal beauty lay a spirit as fierce and untamed as the sacred hawks that soared above the Valley of the Kings. The suffocating weight of royal protocol pressed upon her shoulders like chains of gold. Another morning of lessons awaited. Diplomatic protocol, marriage negotiations, the endless parade of suitors who saw her not as a woman with dreams and desires, but as a political prize to be won. The very thought made her stomach clench with rebellion. "I cannot bear another moment of this prison," she whispered to the morning breeze, her voice carrying the desperate edge of a caged bird longing for freedom. Without another thought, she abandoned her elaborate sleeping gown for a simple tunic of cream-colored linen, the kind worn by temple servants. The coarse fabric felt strange against skin accustomed to the finest silks, but it granted her something more precious than comfort: anonymity. Wrapping a plain shawl around her shoulders, she slipped through the palace corridors like a shadow, her bare feet silent against the polished marble floors. The temple of Isis rose before her like a vision from the realm of the gods themselves. Massive columns soared toward the heavens, each one carved with intricate hieroglyphs that told stories of love, magic, and divine intervention. Golden statues of the goddess stood sentinel in alcoves, their eyes seeming to follow Nefertari as she made her way through the sacred gardens. Lotus flowers floated serenely on the temple's sacred lake, their petals unfurling to greet the dawn like offerings to the rising sun. Here, in this sanctuary dedicated to the goddess of love and magic, Nefertari could finally breathe. The morning air carried the sweet fragrance of jasmine and myrrh, while ibis birds waded through the shallows with elegant grace. This was her refuge, her escape from the gilded cage of royal duty. But she was not alone. The sound of metal striking stone rang through the courtyard with rhythmic precision, each clash echoing off the ancient walls like thunder. Nefertari followed the sound, her curiosity overcoming her caution until she reached the edge of the training ground. There, silhouetted against the golden morning light, stood a warrior unlike any she had ever seen. Khaemwaset moved with the fluid grace of a desert cat, his bronze sword cutting through the humid air in perfect arcs. At 27, he possessed the lean, powerful build of a man forged by battle and hardened by the unforgiving desert sun. His skin gleamed like polished bronze, stretched taut over muscles that rippled with each controlled movement. Dark hair fell in waves to his shoulders, and when he turned, she glimpsed eyes the color of molten copper, intense and focused with the concentration of a true warrior. Sweat traced rivulets down his torso as he practiced combat forms passed down through generations of desert fighters, each movement a deadly dance of precision and power. The morning light caught the sheen of moisture on his skin, making him appear almost godlike in his masculine beauty. Nefertari found herself unable to look away, her heart beating with a rhythm she had never experienced before. There was something primal and magnetic about this man, something that called to the wild spirit she kept carefully hidden beneath layers of royal propriety. As if sensing her presence, Khaemwaset suddenly stilled, his sword frozen mid-strike. Slowly, he turned toward her hiding place among the lotus columns, and their eyes met across the sacred space. Time seemed to suspend itself like a held breath. The world narrowed to this single moment, this electric connection that sparked between them like lightning touching earth. Neither moved, neither spoke, yet something profound and irreversible passed between them in that charged silence. "Forgive me," Nefertari finally managed, stepping from the shadows with as much dignity as she could muster. "I did not mean to disturb your training." Khaemwaset lowered his sword, his intense gaze never leaving her face. "No disturbance, my lady. The temple belongs to all who seek the goddess's blessing." His voice was deep and rich, carrying the slight accent of the southern deserts. There was something in his tone, respectful yet not subservient, that intrigued her. Most men either cowered before her royal presence or attempted to dominate her with their own importance. This warrior did neither. "You train early," she observed, moving closer despite every instinct warning her to maintain proper distance. "Are you a temple guard?" A shadow of something, pain, regret, flickered across his features. "I serve where I am needed. The sword knows no master save skill and dedication." "Spoken like a true philosopher warrior," Nefertari said, unable to suppress a smile. "Do you always speak in riddles, or is this a special courtesy for mysterious women who spy on your morning rituals?" For the first time, his stern expression softened into something approaching a smile. "Perhaps I save my clearest words for those who earn them." The challenge in his voice sent an unexpected thrill through her. When had anyone dared to challenge her, even playfully? And how does one earn such a privilege? By proving they seek more than idle entertainment. He sheathed his sword with fluid grace, the bronze blade sliding home with a whisper of metal against leather. Tell me, what brings a lady of obvious refinement to the temple gardens at dawn? Surely not mere curiosity about a soldier's training." Nefertari felt heat rise in her cheeks. How could this stranger see through her so easily when the court nobles accepted her polite facades without question? "Perhaps I seek solace from the burdens that weigh upon the spirit." Understanding flickered in those copper eyes. "The cage grows too small for the bird within." His words struck her heart with startling accuracy. "You speak as one who knows such cages." "Every man builds his own prison," Khaemwaset replied quietly. "Some are made of stone and iron, others of duty and expectation. The bars may be different, but the longing for freedom remains the same." They stood in the growing light, two souls recognizing a kindred spirit across the vast divide of their different worlds. The morning breeze stirred the lotus petals on the sacred lake, carrying with it the promise of secrets yet to be shared. "I come here often," Nefertari found herself saying, though she had never confessed this to another living soul. "When the weight of destiny becomes too heavy to bear alone, then perhaps our paths were meant to cross in this sacred place." Khaemwaset's voice held a note of wonder, as if he too felt the strange pull of fate drawing them together. My father was a merchant who traveled the trade routes between Egypt and Nubia. He always said that the goddess Isis guides the steps of those whose hearts are pure. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was. He taught me that true nobility comes not from birth, but from the choices we make when faced with adversity. A distant look entered his eyes. He married my mother, despite the obstacles that stood between them. She was from a different world than his. Something in his carefully chosen words suggested a story far more complex than he revealed, but Nefertari sensed this was not the time to press for details. Instead, she found herself drawn to the pain she glimpsed beneath his controlled exterior. "Love that defies convention," she murmured. "How romantic, and how dangerous. The most worthwhile things in life usually are." His gaze met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Don't you think?" Before she could answer, a commotion arose from the direction of the temple proper. Voices called out in the distance, servants searching for someone, their tones growing increasingly urgent. "I must go," Nefertari said quickly, panic fluttering in her chest like a trapped bird. If she were discovered here, alone with a strange man, the scandal would be enormous. "Wait." Khaemwaset stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his copper eyes, close enough to catch the scent of sandalwood and leather that clung to his skin. "Will you come again?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger in equal measure. Every rational thought screamed that she should refuse, should flee back to the safety of her royal chambers and forget this encounter ever happened. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "Tomorrow, at dawn." The smile that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking over the desert, brilliant, warm, and utterly captivating. "Until tomorrow, then, mysterious lady of the lotus gardens." As she hurried away through the temple corridors, Nefertari's heart hammered against her ribs with a wild rhythm that had nothing to do with her hasty retreat. She had just made a promise that could change everything, and the terrifying truth was that she wanted nothing more than to keep it. Behind her, Khaemwaset watched until she disappeared from sight, his warrior's instincts warring with emotions he had never expected to feel. Something about the mysterious woman called to him on a level deeper than mere attraction. In her honey-colored eyes, he had glimpsed a spirit as fierce and yearning as his own. Tomorrow could not come soon enough. The days that followed passed in a haze of stolen moments and growing intimacy. Each dawn found them meeting in the sacred gardens, their conversations ranging from philosophy to dreams, from the burden of duty to the ache of longing for something more than the lives they had been given. Nefertari learned that beneath Khaemwaset's warrior exterior lay a mind as sharp as his blade and a heart capable of surprising tenderness. He spoke of his travels with his merchant father, of the vast desert landscapes that had shaped his soul, of his determination to prove himself worthy of the trust placed in him. Khaemwaset discovered that his mysterious lady possessed not only beauty, but intelligence that rivaled the greatest scholars, and a compassion for the common people that spoke of a truly noble heart. Though she never revealed her true identity, her educated speech and refined manners suggested noble birth, yet she wore her status lightly, without the arrogance he had come to expect from the wealthy. Their friendship deepened with each passing day, built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding that neither had experienced before. Yet beneath the surface of their careful conversations, a current of attraction grew stronger, threatening to sweep away all pretense of mere friendship. It was on the 7th morning of their meetings that everything changed. The festival of Opet had arrived, bringing with it the most important religious celebration in all of Egypt. The entire city of Thebes buzzed with excitement as nobles, priests, and common people alike prepared for the grand procession that would carry the sacred bark of Amun from Karnak to Luxor Temple. Nefertari stood in her chambers as her servants prepared her for the ceremony, their skilled hands transforming her from the simple woman who met a warrior at dawn into the royal princess Egypt expected to see. Layer upon layer of finery adorned her body, a gown of the finest white linen, pleated and bordered with gold thread that caught the light with every movement. Around her neck they fastened the elaborate collar that marked her royal status, its bands of gold, lapis lazuli and turquoise creating a stunning display of wealth and power. The golden uraeus crown settled upon her brow, the sacred serpent seeming to come alive in the morning light. Bracelets of gold and precious stones encircled her wrists and ankles, while her eyes were outlined with kohl in the traditional manner that had adorned Egyptian royalty for thousands of years. When the transformation was complete, Nefertari barely recognized herself in the polished bronze mirror. Gone was the simple woman who had found solace in temple gardens. In her place stood a princess of Egypt, beautiful and untouchable, separated from common humanity by the weight of gold and the burden of divine blood. The procession through Thebes was a spectacle of unparalleled magnificence. Thousands lined the streets to watch as the sacred bark passed, carried on the shoulders of white-robed priests, while incense filled the air with clouds of fragrant smoke. Musicians played haunting melodies on harps and flutes, while dancers moved with fluid grace, their movements telling the ancient stories of gods and mortals. Nefertari rode in a golden chariot beside Pharaoh I, acknowledging the cheers of the crowd with the regal composure expected of royalty. Yet her eyes searched the faces of the palace guard, looking for one particular warrior among the sea of bronze armor and ceremonial weapons. When she finally spotted him, her breath caught in her throat. Khaemwaset stood at attention with the other commanders of the royal guard, magnificent in his ceremonial armor. Bronze plates gleamed over a tunic of royal blue, while a plumed helmet crowned his dark hair. A ceremonial sword hung at his side, its hilt decorated with gold and precious stones that marked his high rank. But it was not his finery that made her heart skip. It was the moment their eyes met across the crowded temple courtyard. Recognition hit them both like a physical blow. The mysterious lady of the Lotus Gardens was Princess Nefertari, adopted daughter of Pharaoh A and one of the most powerful women in Egypt. The warrior who had captured her heart was Khaemwaset, commander of the royal guard and protector of the very throne she was born to serve. The shock in his copper eyes mirrored her own, followed quickly by something that looked dangerously like betrayal. How could she have deceived him so completely? How could he have been so blind to her true identity? Nefertari felt the blood drain from her face as the full implications crashed over her. Their innocent meetings, their growing friendship, the attraction that had bloomed between them, all of it was impossible now. A princess of Egypt could not consort with a common soldier, no matter how noble his character or skilled his sword arm. The ceremony continued around them, but neither heard the chanted prayers or saw the sacred rituals. They were trapped in a moment of mutual recognition that changed everything and destroyed the fragile happiness they had begun to build. As the procession moved toward the inner temple, Pharaoh A raised his hand for silence. His voice, still strong despite his advancing years, carried clearly across the assembled crowd. "People of Egypt, children of the gods, hear the words of your Pharaoh." The crowd fell silent, thousands of faces turning toward their ruler with rapt attention. "Today, as we celebrate the divine marriage of Amun and Mut, we announce another union that will bring strength and prosperity to our beloved land." Nefertari's heart began to pound with dread. She knew what was coming, had known this day would arrive, yet somehow she had allowed herself to forget in the golden haze of her secret meetings. "Our beloved daughter, Princess Nefertari, shall wed Prince Katie of Nubia, cementing the alliance between our kingdoms and ensuring peace along our southern borders." The crowd erupted in cheers, but Nefertari heard nothing but the roaring of blood in her ears. Across the courtyard, she saw Khaemwaset's face go rigid with shock and something that might have been pain. Prince Katie stepped forward from among the Nubian delegation, a man of imposing height and powerful build, his dark skin marked with the ritual scars of his people. Gold gleamed at his throat and wrists, while his eyes held the cold calculation of a man accustomed to taking what he wanted by force. "I am honored to accept this alliance," Katie declared, his voice carrying the authority of one born to rule. "The princess shall find in me a husband worthy of her beauty and station." His gaze found Nefertari across the crowd, and she suppressed a shudder at the possessive hunger she saw there. This was not a man who would cherish a wife. This was a conqueror who viewed her as another territory to be claimed. The ceremony continued, but Nefertari moved through the remaining rituals like a woman in a dream. She smiled when expected, nodded at appropriate moments, and played her role with the skill of one trained from birth in royal protocol. But inside, her heart was breaking into pieces as sharp as shattered pottery. When the formal ceremonies finally ended and the crowd began to disperse, Nefertari found herself surrounded by well-wishes and congratulations that felt like condolences. Through it all, she was acutely aware of Khaemwaset's presence, though he maintained his position with the other guards and never approached. It was only as the sun began to set, painting the temple walls in shades of gold and crimson, that she managed to slip away from the endless stream of courtiers and nobles. Her feet carried her automatically toward the one place that had always offered solace, the sacred gardens of Isis. The lotus flowers had closed their petals for the night, and the sacred lake reflected the first stars like scattered diamonds. The air was cooler now, carrying the promise of the desert night, and somewhere in the distance, a night bird called with haunting beauty. She was not surprised to find him waiting for her among the shadows of the lotus columns. Khaemwaset had shed his ceremonial armor for simple clothes, a plain tunic and kilt that reminded her of their first meeting. But there was nothing simple about the emotions that played across his face as she approached. "Princess," he said, the title falling between them like a sword. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "Not here. Not between us." "What else can there be between us now?" The pain in his voice cut her deeper than any blade. "I have been a fool, dreaming above my station, forgetting the gulf that separates our worlds." "You are not a fool." She stepped closer, desperate to bridge the distance that suddenly seemed vast as the desert itself. "What we shared was real. What we felt was an illusion." His voice was harsh now, the voice of a man trying to convince himself as much as her. "You are a princess of Egypt, daughter of pharaohs, destined for a throne. I am a soldier, nothing more." "You are everything," she said fiercely, her royal composure finally cracking. "You are kind and brave and noble in ways that have nothing to do with birth or title. You see me, not the crown or the gold or the political value, but me." For a moment, his careful control wavered, and she saw the depth of feeling he was trying so hard to suppress. "And what good does that do either of us? You are promised to another, bound by duty and politics, to a marriage that will serve Egypt's interests." "I know." The words came out as barely more than a whisper. "I know, and it is killing me." They stood in the growing darkness, two souls caught between duty and desire, honor and heartbreak. The night breeze stirred the water lilies and carried with it the scent of jasmine and myrrh, the same fragrances that had blessed their first meeting. "I should go," Khaemwaset said finally, though he made no move to leave. "This is madness. If we are discovered—" "I know," she said again, "but I cannot seem to make myself care about the consequences." "Not tonight." Something in her voice, some note of desperate honesty, seemed to break through his resolve. Before either of them could think better of it, he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the starlight reflected in his eyes. "What have you done to me?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I was content with my life, with my duty, until you appeared like some vision from the realm of the gods." "The same thing you have done to me," she replied, her hand rising of its own accord to touch his face. "You have shown me what it means to be truly alive." The touch of her fingers against his skin was like fire and ice combined, sending shockwaves through both of them. For a heartbeat, they stood frozen on the edge of a precipice, knowing that one more step would send them tumbling into territory from which there could be no return. It was Khaemwaset who moved first, his hand covering hers where it rested against his cheek. "This is impossible," he said, but his voice held no conviction. "I know," she whispered for the third time, but now the words carried a different meaning entirely. When he kissed her, it was with the desperate passion of a man drowning, and she responded with equal fervor, pouring all her longing and heartbreak into that single, perfect moment of connection. The world around them faded away. The temple, the politics, the impossible barriers that separated them, leaving only this, the meeting of two souls who had found their perfect match in the most imperfect of circumstances. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their foreheads resting together as they struggled to regain some semblance of control. "What are we going to do?" Nefertari asked, her voice barely audible. Before Khaemwaset could answer, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the temple corridors. They sprang apart like guilty children, hearts pounding with sudden terror. "The princess!" a voice called out. "Has anyone seen Princess Nefertari?" "Here," Khaemwaset whispered urgently, pulling her into the shadow of a massive lotus column. The space was barely wide enough for both of them, forcing them to press close together, her back against the cool stone and his body shielding her from view. The temple guards passed by their hiding place, their torches casting dancing shadows on the walls as they searched for the missing princess. Nefertari held her breath, acutely aware of every point where Khaemwaset's body touched hers, of the rapid beating of his heart against her chest, of the way his breath stirred the hair at her temple. When the footsteps finally faded into the distance, neither of them moved. They remained pressed together in their shadowy alcove, both afraid that stepping back into the light would break whatever spell had been woven around them. "I must go," Nefertari finally whispered, though every fiber of her being rebelled against the words. "I know." His voice was rough with suppressed emotion. "But before you do..." He reached into the folds of his tunic and withdrew something that gleamed in the starlight, a scarab carved from black stone and set in gold, its surface covered with hieroglyphs that seemed to pulse with ancient power. "This belonged to my mother," he said quietly. "She was more than my father ever told most people. She gave this to him as a token of her love, and he gave it to me before he died." Nefertari stared at the scarab, her breath catching as she recognized the royal cartouche carved into its surface. This was no common trinket. This was a piece of royal Nubian jewelry, the kind worn only by those of the highest noble blood. "Your mother," she whispered, understanding flooding through her. She was nobility. A princess of Nubia, exiled during a civil war and given sanctuary by my merchant father. His voice carried old pain and pride in equal measure. He loved her despite the danger, despite the fact that harboring her could have cost him his life. And she loved him enough to give up her throne for a life of simple happiness. The implications crashed over Nefertari like a wave. If Khaemwaset's mother had been Nubian royalty, then he was not the common soldier she had believed him to be. He had royal blood, noble heritage that would make their love less scandalous, though still impossible given her betrothal to Prince Katie. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, though her heart already knew the answer. "Because I want you to know that what I feel for you is not the grasping ambition of a common man reaching above his station." His copper eyes burned with intensity in the starlight. "This is the love of one royal heart for another, even if the world will never acknowledge it." The scarab felt warm in her palm as she closed her fingers around it, as if it carried some echo of the love that had created it. "I will treasure this," she whispered, "always." "As I will treasure every moment we have shared," he replied. "Whatever happens, whatever the future holds, know that you have been the greatest gift the gods have ever given me." Udi! The voices of the searching guards grew closer again, and with a final look that conveyed everything words could not express, Nefertari slipped from their hiding place and made her way back toward the palace, the royal scarab clutched against her heart like a talisman. Behind her, Khaemwaset remained in the shadows, watching until she disappeared from sight. The taste of her kiss still lingered on his lips, and the memory of her touch burned like a brand on his skin. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles to their impossible love, but tonight had given him something precious beyond measure, the knowledge that his feelings were returned, that somewhere in this vast and complicated world there was a woman who loved him, not for his position or his prospects, but for the man he truly was. As the stars wheeled overhead and the sacred Nile flowed eternal toward the sea, two hearts beat in perfect synchronization despite the distance between them, bound by a love that defied every law of gods and men. The die had been cast, the first moves made in a game that would determine not only their personal happiness, but the very fate of Egypt itself. For in the realm of the pharaohs, love was never simple, and the heart's desires could topple kingdoms or forge new dynasties. The story of the princess and the warrior had begun, written in starlight and sealed with a kiss that would echo through eternity. The days following the festival of Opet passed like a fever dream, each sunrise bringing Nefertari closer to a destiny she could no longer bear to contemplate. The palace buzzed with wedding preparations, servants scurrying through corridors laden with bolts of silk from distant lands, and chests overflowing with precious gems that would adorn the bride of Prince Katie. Yet, beneath the veneer of celebration, something darker stirred in the shadows of the ancient stones. High Priest Amenhotep moved through the temple complex like a serpent in human form, his shaved head gleaming in the torchlight as he conducted his daily rituals with practiced precision. To the casual observer, he appeared the very picture of pious devotion, tall and lean, with the ascetic bearing of one who had dedicated his life to serving the gods. But those who looked closer might have noticed the calculating gleam in his dark eyes, the way his thin lips curved in satisfaction when he thought himself unobserved. In the deepest chambers of the temple, where ancient pharaohs had once communed with deities older than memory, Amenhotep held court with a select group of conspirators. The flickering light of oil lamps cast dancing shadows on walls covered with hieroglyphs that seemed to writhe and twist in the uncertain illumination, as if the very stones disapproved of the treachery being planned within their sacred confines. "The boy pharaoh grows weaker by the day," Amenhotep murmured to the assembled figures, his voice carrying the hypnotic cadence of a priest accustomed to commanding attention. "And Pharaoh I's strength fails as well. Soon Egypt will need new leadership that understands the true will of the gods." Among his listeners sat corrupt nobles whose loyalty had been purchased with gold and promises of power, palace guards whose gambling debts had made them vulnerable to blackmail, and foreign agents whose presence in the sacred temple would have meant death if discovered by loyal Egyptians. At the center of this web of corruption sat Prince Katie himself, his massive frame draped in rich Nubian silks that did nothing to soften his predatory bearing. "The princess will serve our purposes well," Katie rumbled, his voice carrying the authority of one accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Once we are wed, I will have legitimate claim to Egyptian territory, and once she has served her purpose—" He let the threat hang unfinished in the air, but his meaning was clear to all present. Amenhotep's smile was as cold as the desert night. The gods have a way of calling home those who have fulfilled their earthly duties. A tragic accident, perhaps, or a sudden illness that strikes down the young and beautiful in their prime. The conspiracy had been months in the making, its roots extending deep into the palace hierarchy and beyond Egypt's borders. Nubian gold had purchased silence and cooperation, while carefully crafted lies had sown discord among the royal guard. Even the royal physicians had been compromised, their healing potions replaced with subtle poisons that weakened rather than strengthened their royal patience. But it was not only in the temple's hidden chambers that darkness gathered. Throughout the palace, observant eyes began to notice troubling signs: servants who whispered in corners and fell silent when approached, guards who seemed nervous and avoided eye contact with their superiors, and strange comings and goings in the dead of night when honest people should have been asleep. Nefertari felt the weight of these changes pressing upon her spirit like a physical burden. The royal scarab that Khaemwaset had given her rested against her heart, hidden beneath layers of silk and gold, its presence both a comfort and a constant reminder of the impossible love that consumed her thoughts. Sleep eluded her, and when it finally came, her dreams were filled with copper eyes and gentle hands that could never truly be hers. The wedding preparations continued with relentless efficiency, each detail planned and executed with the precision of a military campaign. Seamstresses worked day and night to create a gown worthy of a princess, its white linen adorned with gold thread that formed intricate patterns of lotus flowers and sacred symbols. Jewelers crafted a crown that would mark her as a Nubian queen, its design incorporating elements from both Egyptian and Nubian traditions to symbolize the union of two great kingdoms. Yet even as the external preparations proceeded, Nefertari's internal world crumbled piece by piece. Each fitting session felt like a rehearsal for her own funeral, each discussion of wedding protocols another step toward a prison from which there would be no escape. The thought of Prince Katie's hands upon her, of submitting to a man who viewed her as nothing more than a political prize, made her stomach churn with revulsion. It was during one such fitting session that salvation appeared in an unexpected form. Pharaoh I, observing his adopted daughter's pale complexion and listless demeanor, made a decision that would change the course of events in ways he could never have imagined. "The princess appears unwell," he announced to the assembled courtiers, his weathered face creased with genuine concern. "Perhaps the stress of the upcoming nuptials has taken its toll. I believe she would benefit from additional protection during these uncertain times." The suggestion that followed seemed reasonable enough. Nefertari would receive personal combat training from the commander of the royal guard, a precaution deemed necessary given the political tensions surrounding her marriage to a foreign prince. What Pharaoh I could not have foreseen was that this decision would throw his adopted daughter and Khaemwaset together in circumstances that would test every ounce of their self-control. The training sessions began in a secluded chamber deep within the palace, a room that had once served as a private armory for ancient pharaohs. Weapons lined the walls, bronze swords and daggers, bows of horn and sinew, spears tipped with points sharp enough to pierce the finest armor. The air smelled of leather and metal, of oil used to preserve weapons, and the faint musk of exertion from countless hours of practice. When Nefertari entered the chamber for her first lesson, she found Khaemwaset waiting with his back turned, examining a selection of daggers laid out on a wooden table. He had exchanged his ceremonial armor for simple training clothes, a plain tunic and kilt that emphasized the lean strength of his warrior's body. When he turned to face her, the careful neutrality of his expression could not quite mask the pain that flickered in his copper eyes. "Princess," he said formally, offering a bow that maintained proper protocol while somehow conveying a wealth of unspoken emotion. "I am honored to serve as instructor in the arts of self-defense." "Commander," she replied, matching his formal tone even as her heart raced at his proximity. "I am grateful for the knowledge that will be shared." The first lesson focused on the basics: how to hold a dagger properly, the correct stance for balance and mobility, the vital points on a human body where a well-placed blade could disable or kill an attacker. Khaemwaset's instruction was professional and thorough. But when he moved behind her to adjust her grip on the weapon, the brush of his fingers against hers sent lightning through her veins. "Feel the weight of the blade," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear as he guided her movements. "Let it become an extension of your arm, as natural as breathing." The dagger trembled in her grasp, though whether from the effort of maintaining proper form or the effect of his nearness, she could not say. "Like this?" she asked, attempting to focus on the lesson rather than the way his chest pressed against her back as he demonstrated the correct technique. "Exactly." His voice was rougher than usual, betraying his own struggle to maintain professional distance. "You have natural instincts for this. Most nobles resist the idea that they might need to defend themselves, but you understand the necessity." As the days passed, their training sessions became the highlight of Nefertari's existence, the only hours when she felt truly alive. Under Khaemwaset's patient tutelage, she learned to shoot a bow with surprising accuracy, to move with the fluid grace of a dancer while wielding deadly steel, to read an opponent's intentions in the subtle shift of weight or the flicker of an eye. But more than combat skills, these sessions provided opportunities for the kind of intimate conversation that had been impossible since their true identities were revealed. Hidden away from the prying eyes of the court, they could speak freely of their hopes and fears, their dreams and disappointments, the growing love that neither dared acknowledge aloud. "You fight like someone who has everything to lose," Khaemwaset observed one afternoon, as they practiced with wooden training swords, their blades clacking together in a rhythm as complex as any dance. "Perhaps because I do," Nefertari replied, pressing her attack with a ferocity that surprised them both. "Everything I have ever valued is slipping away, piece by piece, and I am powerless to stop it." Their swords locked at the hilts, bringing them face to face in a moment of suspended combat. Sweat beaded on both their brows from the exertion, and their breathing came in short, sharp gasps that had nothing to do with physical effort. "You are never powerless," Khaemwaset said quietly, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her knees weak. "You are the strongest person I have ever known, royal or common. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise." The wooden swords fell forgotten to the floor as they stood frozen in that charged moment, the air between them crackling with unspoken desire. It would have been so easy to close the distance between them, to give in to the passion that threatened to consume them both. But the sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor beyond forced them apart like guilty conspirators. It was during one of these training sessions that Khaemwaset first noticed something amiss in the palace's daily rhythms. A message had been delivered to the wrong recipient, a coded communication that spoke of payments made and services rendered, of loyalty purchased and silence guaranteed. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the seal that had secured the papyrus bore the mark of the temple hierarchy. "This should not exist," he murmured, showing the intercepted message to Nefertari during their next private moment. Palace communications are carefully controlled, and this speaks of activities that have no legitimate purpose. Nefertari studied the cryptic text, her education in multiple languages allowing her to decipher references that would have been meaningless to most. "These are payments to palace guards," she realized with growing alarm. And here, mention of medicine that weakens rather than heals. Someone is systematically corrupting the very foundations of royal security. Their investigation began cautiously, each of them using their unique access to different areas of the palace to gather information. Nefertari's royal status allowed her to move freely through chambers where servants whispered of strange happenings, while Khaemwaset's position as guard commander gave him insight into the subtle changes in loyalty and behavior among the military ranks. What they discovered chilled them to the bone. The conspiracy reached into every level of palace life, from the lowest kitchen servants to the highest nobles. Pharaoh A's gradual weakening was not the natural decline of age, but the result of mercury-laced medicine administered by corrupted physicians. Young Tutankhamun's mysterious illness followed the same pattern, a slow poisoning designed to appear as natural causes while clearing the path for new leadership. Amenhotep seeks to control the throne through puppet rulers, Khaemwaset explained during one of their clandestine meetings, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. And Prince Keti provides the military might to enforce his will once the current pharaohs are eliminated. "But why marry me at all?" Nefertari asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. If they plan to seize power through force, what purpose does a political alliance serve? Khaemwaset's expression darkened with protective fury. Legitimacy. A marriage to Egyptian royalty gives Keti legal claim to rule, making conquest appear as rightful inheritance. And once that claim is established, he did not need to finish the sentence. They both understood that a wife who had served her political purpose would become a liability to be eliminated, her death clearing the way for Keti to rule Egypt as a Nubian conquest rather than an allied kingdom. The weight of their discovery pressed upon them like the stones of a pyramid, massive and inescapable. They held the fate of Egypt in their hands, yet they were powerless to act through normal channels. Who could they trust when corruption had spread so far? Which guards remained loyal when gold had purchased so many consciences? Even approaching Pharaoh A directly might prove fatal if the wrong ears overheard their accusations. It was during this period of desperate uncertainty that their relationship deepened beyond mere attraction into something that transcended the physical realm entirely. Bound together by shared danger and common purpose, they found in each other not just passion, but partnership, not just love, but the kind of soul-deep connection that poets claimed existed only in legend. Their stolen moments became more precious than any treasure in the royal vaults. A brush of fingers when passing documents, a lingering glance across a crowded chamber, the whispered endearments that passed between them during training sessions. Each contact was treasured like a drop of water in the desert, sustaining them through the increasingly dangerous game they were forced to play. But even their careful precautions could not shield them indefinitely from the web of surveillance that Amenhotep had woven throughout the palace. Servants loyal to the high priest reported on every conversation, every meeting, every deviation from normal routine. It was only a matter of time before their investigation was discovered, and when that moment came, the consequences would be swift and merciless. The trap was sprung on a night when the moon hung like a silver scarab in the star-studded sky, its light filtering through the palace windows to create patterns of shadow and illumination that seemed to shift and dance with malevolent life. Nefertari had been summoned to what she believed was a private audience with Pharaoh I, but when she entered the designated chamber, she found herself facing a tribunal of accusers led by Amenhotep himself. "Princess Nefertari," the high priest intoned, his voice carrying the weight of religious authority, "you stand accused of consorting with enemies of Egypt, of betraying the trust placed in you by your royal father, and of conduct unbecoming to one of your exalted station." The chamber filled with murmurs of shock and dismay from the assembled nobles, many of whom were genuine in their surprise, while others played their parts in the carefully orchestrated drama. Prince Keti stood among the accusers, his face a mask of righteous indignation that poorly concealed his satisfaction at seeing his troublesome bride-to-be brought low. "These are serious charges," Pharaoh A said heavily, his voice betraying the exhaustion of a man whose strength had been slowly sapped by months of subtle poisoning. "What evidence supports such accusations?" Amenhotep produced a collection of documents and testimonies, each piece of evidence carefully crafted to paint a picture of treachery and betrayal. Messages allegedly written in Nefertari's hand spoke of secret alliances with Egypt's enemies, while witnesses claimed to have seen her in compromising situations with foreign agents. But the most damning evidence was yet to come. Guards burst into the chamber, dragging Khaemwaset between them, his hands bound and his face bearing the marks of a struggle. Blood trickled from a cut on his lip, and his ceremonial armor had been replaced with the simple clothes of a prisoner. "Commander Khaemwaset," Amenhotep continued with theatrical solemnity, "you stand accused of seducing a royal princess, of using your position to gain access to state secrets, and of betraying the oath of loyalty you swore to the throne of Egypt." The sight of Khaemwaset in chains sent a spear of anguish through Nefertari's heart so sharp that she gasped aloud, her carefully maintained composure cracking like a mask struck by a hammer. Their eyes met across the chamber, and in that moment of connection, she saw not defeat but determination, not despair, but a fierce resolve that gave her strength to face whatever was to come. "I demand the right to speak in my own defense," she declared, drawing upon every lesson in royal bearing she had ever learned. "These charges are fabricated lies designed to serve the ambitions of those who would see Egypt weakened and divided." "The time for words has passed," Prince Katie rumbled, stepping forward with the confidence of a man who believed victory was already assured. "The evidence speaks clearly of treachery that demands the ultimate punishment. I call for the immediate execution of this traitor who dared to lay hands upon my promised bride." The chamber erupted in chaos as nobles took sides, some calling for justice while others demanded mercy. But beneath the shouting and confusion, a different drama was unfolding. Several of the palace guards, men whose loyalty to Khaemwaset ran deeper than any bribe could purchase, had positioned themselves strategically throughout the chamber. These were warriors who had fought beside their commander, who had seen his courage in battle and his honor in peace, and who refused to believe the charges brought against him. When the moment came, their coordinated action was swift and decisive. Oil lamps were overturned, plunging portions of the chamber into darkness while creating confusion and panic among the assembled nobles. In the chaos that followed, loyal hands cut Khaemwaset's bonds, while others cleared a path toward the chamber's secondary exit, a passage known only to the oldest servants and used by ancient pharaohs when discretion was required. "This way, princess," urged an elderly guard whose scarred face spoke of decades of faithful service. "There are passages beneath the palace that lead to the river. If we move quickly, we can reach safety before they organize pursuit." The flight through the palace's hidden tunnels was a nightmare of narrow passages and crumbling stonework, lit only by the flickering torches carried by their rescuers. The air was thick with dust and the musty scent of ages, while somewhere behind them echoed the sounds of pursuit, shouting voices and running feet that grew closer with each passing moment. They emerged from the tunnels at a dock where the Nile lapped gently against stone steps, worn smooth by countless generations of use. A small barge waited in the shadows, its single sail furled, and its crew consisting of rivermen whose loyalty had been purchased not with gold, but with respect for the commander who had always treated common soldiers as brothers in arms. "Quickly now," Khaemwaset urged, helping Nefertari aboard the vessel with hands that trembled slightly from the aftermath of their narrow escape. "We must reach the main current before they realize which direction we have taken." As the barge slipped away from the dock and into the embrace of the eternal Nile, Nefertari felt the last chains of her old life falling away like discarded jewelry. Behind them lay the palace that had been both home and prison, the throne that had defined her identity, and the future that had been planned for her by others. Ahead lay only uncertainty, danger, and the man whose love had become more precious to her than all the treasures of Egypt. The night air was cool against her skin as they drifted past sleeping villages and ancient temples, the river carrying them toward an unknown destiny with the same inexorable force that had shaped the land of Egypt for thousands of years. For the first time since the festival of Opet, Nefertari felt truly free, her heart soaring like the sacred hawks that nested in the cliffs above the Nile. When Khaemwaset moved to sit beside her in the bow of the barge, she did not hesitate to lean against his shoulder, drawing comfort from his solid presence and the steady rhythm of his breathing. They had lost everything: position, security, the comfortable certainties of their former lives, but in losing all of that, they had found something infinitely more valuable. "What happens now?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible above the gentle splash of water against the barge's hull. "Now we fight," he replied, his arm tightening around her in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "We fight for Egypt, for justice, and for the right to love without shame or apology." As the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns and the sacred river bore them toward whatever fate awaited, Nefertari knew that their greatest trials lay ahead. But she also knew that she would face them with a partner whose courage matched her own, whose love had already proven stronger than the bonds of duty and convention. The princess and the warrior had chosen their path, and there would be no turning back. The eternal flow of the Nile, which had been their brief deceptive sanctuary, soon gave way to the relentless embrace of the western desert. The urgent whispers of their loyal rivermen, warning of intensified pursuit, left them no choice. They abandoned the small barge under the cloak of deepest night, exchanging the gentle lapping of water for the gritty crunch of sand beneath their feet. The air, once humid and fragrant, now turned dry and sharp, tasting of dust and the vast, untamed wilderness stretching endlessly before them beyond the familiar contours of the Valley of the Kings. Every step deeper into the desert felt like a severance from their past, a deliberate choice to leave behind the gilded cage of the palace for a freedom born of desperation. The sun, when it rose, was a merciless eye in the sky, beating down upon endless dunes that shimmered with deceptive promise. The landscape was a painter's palette of burnt ochre and pale gold, sculpted by winds into treacherous waves that rose and fell without end. Treacherous sandstorms, sudden and furious, would erupt from the horizon, swallowing the world in a blinding, suffocating whirlwind of grit, forcing them to huddle together, cloaked head to toe, until the fury passed. In those moments, pressed close, the physical discomfort was forgotten in the warmth of shared breath, the silent promise of survival. It was in this unforgiving crucible that Khaemwaset's mastery of the desert truly shone. Every grain of sand, every shifting dune, every whisper of the wind was a language he understood intimately, passed down through generations from his nomadic father. He knew how to read the faint tracks of desert creatures, where to find meager sustenance in the most barren stretches, and how to preserve their precious water supply drop by precious drop. He moved with a silent, confident grace that spoke of a lifetime spent in harmony with this harsh mistress, a stark contrast to the court life Nefertari had known. Yet Nefertari, despite her royal upbringing, surprised even herself. Her studies had included ancient maps, charting forgotten trade routes and the locations of long-lost oases. Her knowledge, once a mere academic pursuit, now became their guiding light, complementing Khaemwaset's raw instinct with scholarly precision. As they navigated the labyrinthine canyons and scaled the sun-baked ridges, their reliance on each other became absolute, a bond forged not in silk and jewels, but in sweat and the shared will to survive. Their love, born in stolen glances and hushed words, deepened into a profound, unbreakable connection, a quiet understanding that transcended words. In the face of such overwhelming adversity, their individual strengths merged, creating an unspoken symphony of shared purpose. After what felt like an eternity, but was in truth a few relentless days, Khaemwaset led them to the mouth of a narrow, winding wadi. As they penetrated its cool depths, the air grew softer, carrying a faint, sweet scent. The wadi opened into a hidden paradise, Karga Oasis, a legendary refuge known only to the most seasoned desert nomads and those connected to Khaemwaset's father's ancient trading network. It was a vision of vibrant life against the stark backdrop of death. Towering date palms, their fronds swaying gently, offered merciful shade, while crystal-clear springs bubbled up from the earth, filling a tranquil pool that reflected the impossibly blue sky. Here, nestled amongst the lush greenery, stood the crumbling remains of an ancient temple, its sun-baked mud brick walls whispering tales of a forgotten kingdom from the Old Kingdom era, centuries before their own. In this sanctuary, away from prying eyes and the suffocating burden of their flight, their love blossomed with an almost unbearable intensity. The desert had stripped away every pretense, every formality, leaving only the raw, undeniable truth of their feelings. They spent precious days exploring the oasis, discovering hidden grottos adorned with faded cave paintings, their hands brushing, their eyes lingering. Each shared moment was a profound revelation. Under the vast, star-dusted canopy of the desert night, beside the murmuring springs, they finally allowed themselves to be truly vulnerable, truly seen. In the tender intimacy of their embraces, Nefertari learned not just the warmth of his skin, but the depths of his soul. He held her with a reverence that spoke volumes, a silent language of devotion that transcended mere physical desire. Every touch, every whispered breath, was an affirmation of a love that defied all boundaries. It was here, amidst the timeless tranquility of Karga, that Nefertari learned the complete heartbreaking story of Khaemwaset's past. His voice, usually so steady and strong, softened with a pain that echoed across the years. His mother, Princess Kandake of Nubia, had been forced to flee her homeland during a brutal civil war, seeking refuge in Egypt. She had not been enslaved in the traditional sense, but exiled, a royal refugee who found sanctuary and love with his merchant father, a man of integrity and courage who had defied social conventions to cherish her. He spoke of her grace, her spirit, and the quiet dignity with which she had adapted to a life far removed from royalty. Nefertari listened, her heart aching for the young princess, and finding a kinship with Khaemwaset that deepened her understanding of him. She saw then that his strength, his wisdom, his very being were a testament to the powerful, unconventional love that had brought him into the world. He was truly the son of desert winds and Nubian royalty, a heritage as rich and complex as her own. As they explored the ancient ruins within the oasis, their shared destiny began to unfold before them. Deep within the forgotten temple, hidden behind a crumbling wall, they discovered a chamber untouched by time, its walls covered in vivid hieroglyphs. Nefertari, with her scholarly training, found she could read the ancient texts with an uncanny ease, as if the words were imprinted upon her very soul. The hieroglyphs depicted a prophecy, meticulously detailed, about a princess and a warrior whose love would restore Ma'at, the cosmic order and balance, to Egypt. The prophecy spoke of a time when the daughter of two lands joins with the son of desert winds, the serpent's poison shall be cleansed, and the two kingdoms shall know peace under the blessing of Isis. As Nefertari recited the ancient words, Khaemwaset's royal Nubian scarab, the one he had given her in the hidden palace chambers, began to pulse with a soft, ethereal light, confirming his noble heritage and validating the prophecy's truth. A profound sense of divine favor washed over them, a realization that their love was not merely fate, but a sacred covenant. Their idyll, however, was destined to be fleeting. The desert, while vast, was not empty. Prince Keti, fueled by rage and a thirst for power, had dispatched his most relentless Nubian trackers, who, with the aid of treacherous desert informants loyal to Amenhotep, discovered their trail. Simultaneously, Amenhotep, desperate to secure his wicked plot, sent corrupted Egyptian soldiers, their orders chillingly clear. Capture them alive for public execution, a stark warning to any who dared to defy the high priest's will. The cat-and-mouse game began anew, far more perilous than before. They moved through narrow desert canyons, their footsteps swallowed by the echoing silence, and hid within the labyrinthine passages of ancient tombs near the Valley of the Kings, seeking refuge among the silent dead. Every rustle of wind, every distant cry of a jackal sent a shiver of dread down their spines. Nefertari and Khaemwaset relied on their combined wit and courage, using every shadow, every rock formation to evade their relentless pursuers. The desert, which had been their sanctuary, now became a deadly arena. The inevitable confrontation arrived in a sun-baked box canyon, its sheer walls rising like stone giants, offering no escape. Kheti's Nubian champions, 3 towering warriors, emerged from the shadows, their bronze weapons glinting menacingly. They were men of fearsome reputation, chosen for their brutal strength and unwavering loyalty to their prince. Khaemwaset, weary but resolute, stepped forward, his body poised, his eyes locked on his adversaries. This was a trial by combat, a fight not just for their lives, but for everything they believed in. Nefertari, her heart pounding like a drum against her ribs, stood close, gripping the royal scarab he had given her. She closed her eyes, murmuring ancient prayers to Isis, her voice a desperate plea carried on the wind. As she invoked the goddess's name, the scarab in her palm began to glow, radiating a warm, protective light that seemed to shimmer around Khaemwaset. The battle was epic, a blur of bronze and dust, Kheti's champions fighting with savage ferocity. But Khaemwaset, fueled by his love for Nefertari and a fierce determination to protect her, moved with a grace that bordered on the superhuman. His movements were a deadly dance, each parry and thrust executed with practiced precision. The choreography of their struggle filled the canyon, a primal ballet of survival. With a final powerful blow, Khaemwaset disarmed the last champion, who fell defeated. Victory was theirs, but the cost was devastating. A deep, jagged wound marred Khaemwaset's side, a gash that bled freely, threatening to steal his life away. He crumpled to the ground, his face pale, his breath shallow. Nefertari's training, once a mere precaution, now became their only hope. Drawing upon the knowledge of Egyptian medicine she had absorbed from the temple priestesses during her youth, she tore strips from her linen tunic, pressing them against his wound, her fingers trembling but steady. She chanted ancient incantations, pleas for healing, as she worked tirelessly, her face etched with desperate determination. Khaemwaset's body burned with fever, and in his delirium, his true feelings poured forth in a torrent of whispered words. He spoke of his love, pure and unwavering, a devotion that transcended the pain. He spoke of his willingness to die for her, for Egypt, for the justice he had always sought. Hearing the depth of his devotion, the raw purity of his heart, Nefertari realized then that true nobility had nothing to do with birth or title, but with character, with courage, and with an unshakable spirit. He was her pharaoh, her king, in every way that mattered. As Nefertari continued her desperate vigil, a divine sign manifested itself. As the desert cooled, painting the sky with hues of purple and deep indigo, Isis, the great goddess of magic and healing, appeared to them both in a shared vision. Her form, ethereal and luminous, filled the small space, bathing them in a comforting light. She confirmed their destiny, their love a sacred bond, part of a divine plan to restore justice to Egypt and unite the two lands. And then, a final crucial revelation. She bestowed upon Nefertari the precise antidote formula for the royal poisoning, a complex blend of rare herbs and ancient minerals, a secret knowledge that would cleanse Tutankhamun and Pharaoh Eye of the mercury that slowly consumed them. As Khaemwaset slowly recovered, his body weak but his spirit rekindled, their shared vision became their guiding star. The goddess's instructions were clear, their path illuminated. They must return to Thebes not as fugitives, but as instruments of divine will. They were to arrive during the festival of the inundation, a sacred time when all of Egypt gathered at Karnak, and expose the conspiracy during the most hallowed of ceremonies. The task was monumental, fraught with unimaginable danger, but they would face it together. Their love, tested by fire and sand, had emerged stronger, more resolute than ever. They were ready. The desert had stripped them bare, but in doing so had revealed their true purpose. They would return, and they would fight for their love, for justice, and for the very soul of Egypt, whatever the cost. The great inundation, the lifeblood of Egypt, was approaching. In the year 1324 before the birth of Christ, the anticipation was not merely for fertile lands, but for a spectacle of power and devotion at Karnak Temple. It was precisely this convergence of faith and politics that Nefertari and Khaemwaset chose as their battleground. Disguised as humble pilgrims, their faces smudged with dust and their fine linens replaced by coarse robes, they melted into the throng of thousands streaming towards the magnificent temple complex. Every step was a risk, every shadowed face a potential betrayer. The air thrummed with the excitement of the festival, but beneath it lay a palpable tension, a sense of disquiet that mirrored the troubled state of Thebes. The city groaned under the insidious machinations of High Priest Amenhotep. Young Tutankhamun, the boy pharaoh, remained shrouded in his chambers, his illness growing worse by the day, a whisper of a life fading. Pharaoh I, his regent, though still holding the reins of power, moved with a slowness, a weariness, that spoke of a vitality steadily draining away. Amenhotep, with his chillingly calm demeanor, now wielded unchecked authority, his pronouncements echoing from the temple, effectively ruling Egypt. The people, their faces etched with a silent suffering, endured increased taxes that fed the priests' coffers while their own granaries dwindled. Hope, once as abundant as the Nile's waters, was drying up, replaced by a sullen resignation. But in the hushed corners of taverns and the shadowed alleys of the marketplace, whispers of resistance, of discontent, began to stir. Nefertari, moving among them, felt the pulse of her people's suffering, a pain that fueled her resolve. Khaemwaset, ever watchful, sought out the eyes of honest soldiers, men whose loyalty to the throne and to him ran deeper than any bribe. He found them, a silent network of those who remembered his honor, who yearned for justice to return to the land. They were the hidden currents that would swell into a tidal wave against the corrupt. Their first task was to infiltrate the vast temple complex, a labyrinth of halls, sanctuaries, and hidden passages. Armed with Khaemwaset's intimate knowledge of the palace's forgotten roots and Nefertari's royal understanding of its secret chambers, they moved like shadows within shadows. The air inside the temple was thick with the scent of ancient incense, a stark contrast to the stench of betrayal they sought to unearth. Their target, Amenhotep's private chambers, rumored to hold the high priest's most damning secrets. Nefertari's heart hammered against her ribs as she navigated the familiar corridors that now felt alien and menacing. Her royal seals, hidden in the folds of her robe, were not mere ornaments but keys to forbidden doors. She used them with a practiced ease, her movements precise, her face a mask of serene determination. Deep within Amenhotep's hidden sanctum, they found it, the grim evidence of his treachery. Tiny vials, unlabeled, yet holding the telltale shimmer of mercury, were concealed within the royal medicine stores, proof of the slow poison administered to Tutankhamun and Pharaoh I. Forged documents, bearing the royal seal, but penned with a subtle variation only Nefertari's trained eye could discern. Detailed false decrees and alliances. And, in a hidden compartment beneath a ceremonial altar, they discovered stolen temple gold, glistening obscenely in the dim light, the true price of Amenhotep's ambition. With each discovery, a cold rage solidified within Nefertari. This was not mere power-mongering. It was a sacrilege, a betrayal of Egypt's very soul. Meanwhile, Khaemwaset moved among his old comrades, whispering words of truth, showing them the small royal Nubian scarab that was his mother's, the ancient symbol of his true lineage. The scarab, glowing faintly, spoke more powerfully than any words, affirming his noble heritage, his undeniable right to challenge the deep-seated corruption that threatened to devour their beloved land. His loyal soldiers, witnessing the scarab's glow and hearing the terrible truth of Amenhotep's plot, pledged their allegiance, their eyes burning with renewed purpose. The climactic day of the festival of the inundation dawned, a day meant for joy and renewal, now poised on the precipice of revolution. Thousands gathered in the grand courtyard of Karnak Temple. A sea of faces turned towards the sacred procession. Dignitaries from distant lands, Nubian ambassadors and nobles from every nome stood shoulder to shoulder, unaware of the explosive truth about to shatter their illusions. The high priest Amenhotep stood at the altar, his voice reverberating with false piety, preparing to offer prayers for the Nile's flood. It was then, as his hands raised the incense, that Nefertari made her move. Shedding her pilgrim's cloak with a dramatic flourish, she stepped forward, her royal regalia, once concealed, now gleaming in the harsh sunlight. The golden uraeus crown caught the light, and the elaborate collar of lapis lazuli and gold shimmered around her neck. A gasp rippled through the assembled throng. It was the princess Nefertari, believed by many to be a traitor, or worse, dead. "Stop!" Her voice, clear and strong, resonated across the vast courtyard, silencing the murmurs. "I, Nefertari, princess of the two lands, accuse High Priest Amenhotep of treason before the gods and before all Egypt." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Amenhotep's face, usually so composed, contorted in a mask of shock and fury. He bellowed for guards, but Khaemwaset's loyal men, strategically positioned, stood firm, their eyes fixed on their commander. Nefertari, her hand outstretched, invoked ancient Egyptian law. "I demand trial by combat." From the ranks of Amenhotep's retinue, Prince Kati stepped forward, his massive frame radiating malevolent confidence. His eyes, fixed on Nefertari, held a predatory glint. "I will be Amenhotep's champion. I will silence this treacherous woman and claim what is mine." As Nefertari spoke, the hieroglyphs from the desert temple, etched upon her skin by unseen forces, began to glow with a soft, otherworldly light, a visible manifestation of divine favor that captivated the awe-struck crowd. It marked her as chosen by Isis, a living prophecy fulfilled. Kati, seeing the light, merely sneered, confident his brute strength was superior to any magic. The sacred courtyard of Karnak transformed into an arena. The air crackled with anticipation as Khaemwaset, now in his full commander's armor, stepped forward, his eyes locked with Kati's. The battle was not merely a clash of men, but of ideals. Kati's brute force and Nubian war tactics against Khaemwaset's honed skill, agile speed, and mastery of Egyptian combat techniques. Every parry, every thrust was infused with the weight of Egypt's destiny. The crowd roared, their voices a symphony of fear, hope, and bloodlust. As the combat raged, a hawk, the majestic symbol of Horus, circled overhead, its silent flight inspiring Khaemwaset with fierce determination. Then, as if answering Nefertari's silent prayers, a pure white ibis, sacred to Isis, descended gracefully, landing on a nearby column, its presence a calm beacon of divine approval. The battle reached its climax. Kati, desperate, charged with a wild cry, but Khaemwaset, using a sudden, unexpected maneuver, disarmed him. Kati stumbled, leaving himself open. With a swift, precise movement, Khaemwaset ended the prince's life, a clean, final blow. Kati fell, his last breath a guttural curse against Egypt. A stunned silence fell upon the courtyard, then erupted into a roar of triumph. Amenhotep, seeing his champion fall, attempted to flee, his face contorted in panic. But the enraged crowd, now emboldened by the truth and the visible evidence of his treachery, surged forward. They had found the hidden mercury vials, the forged documents, the stolen gold. The evidence was undeniable. The high priest, once so revered, was torn apart by the very people he sought to exploit, his end a brutal, visceral justice. Meanwhile, the royal physicians, armed with Isis's divine formula, swiftly administered the antidote to Tutankhamun and Pharaoh I. Over the next several weeks, the poison slowly receded, and life, vibrant and clear, returned to their eyes. Public trials followed, swift and merciless. All involved nobles and corrupted guards faced justice, their crimes laid bare before the restored rule of Ma'at. Pharaoh I, now fully recovered, stood before his court, his eyes filled with a profound gratitude. He looked at Nefertari and Khaemwaset, the saviors of his throne and his family. He elevated Khaemwaset to noble status, granting him vast lands in Upper Egypt and the prestigious title Guardian of the Southern Gates, a position that honored his Nubian heritage while serving Egypt. Nefertari, though offered the highest honors, chose love over political marriage, retaining her title as Princess of the Two Lands, but forging her own path alongside the man who saw her for who she truly was. A new peace treaty with Nubia was swiftly negotiated, one built on mutual respect and generous trade agreements, not on forced alliances. The shadow of war receded, replaced by the promise of shared prosperity. 1 year to the day after their first clandestine meeting, as the sun painted the sky with strokes of amber and rose, Nefertari and Khaemwaset stood before the temple of Isis, the sacred place of their forbidden encounters. Their wedding was a ceremony of unparalleled beauty, a fusion of Egyptian royal traditions and the rich, vibrant customs of Khaemwaset's Nubian heritage. As they exchanged vows, the ancient prophecy revealed in the desert temple found its glorious fulfillment. The Nile, as if in divine blessing, flooded perfectly, enriching the lands and signaling a new golden age. All of Egypt celebrated, their voices a joyous chorus of hope and renewal. The royal couple, princess and warrior, symbolized the unity of different peoples, a love that had defied all odds to bring balance back to the land. 5 years had drifted like a gentle breeze across the sands of Egypt, settling the dust of turmoil and sowing the seeds of enduring peace. In the year 1319 before the birth of Christ, the sun still painted the sky with molten gold each dawn. But now its light seemed to carry a different promise, one of serenity, of stability, of a love that had defied all odds to heal a nation. Nefertari and Khaemwaset stood as the guiding stars of a prosperous province in Upper Egypt, nestled close to the Nubian border. It was a verdant land, blessed by the Nile's bounty and thriving under their unique rule. Nefertari, with her sharp intellect and compassionate heart, oversaw the granaries and the people's well-being, her wisdom like the steady current of the river. Khaemwaset, the former warrior, now governed with a quiet strength and unwavering justice, his decisions as firm as the desert mountains, yet tempered by a profound understanding of human frailty. Their reign was a living testament to their combined virtues, a symphony of royal wisdom and common compassion, proving that true leadership emerged from the heart. The very air in their province hummed with the joyful energy of a land restored. Children, plump and laughing, chased each other through fields of ripening grain, their carefree cries a stark contrast to the whispered fears of years past. Nowhere was this joyous new era more evident than in the private gardens of their villa, where twin blossoms of their impossible love now bloomed. A boy, his laughter echoing his father's deep voice, possessed Khaemwaset's bright copper eyes and boundless energy. A girl, with Nefertari's honeyed gaze and serene grace, moved with the quiet dignity of a budding queen. They played among the lotus flowers, the very symbols of eternal life and rebirth, their innocence a daily reminder of the precious legacy their parents had forged. Their presence was a constant reaffirmation of a love that had not only endured the storms, but had created new life, vibrant and full of promise. Beyond their province, the whole of Egypt breathed easier. Under the wise counsel of Pharaoh Ai, the young Tutankhamun had blossomed into a just and capable ruler. The mercury that had poisoned his body had been cleansed, and with it the insidious venom of Amenhotep's conspiracy. The court, once rife with whispers and betrayal, now functioned with a restored sense of duty and loyalty. Trade flourished anew with Nubia, not through forced alliances, but through honest mutual respect, sealed by the very love that had united Khaemwaset and Nefertari. The ancient prophecies spoke of a time when the two lands would know peace, and now it was a tangible reality, built on the foundations of truth and a love that had defied convention. The years had etched subtle lines around Nefertari's eyes, not of sorrow but of wisdom, deepening the profound understanding that resided within her gaze. Khaemwaset's handsome face bore the faint marks of past battles, but his eyes, once guarded, now held a deep, settled peace, a testament to the battles won and the love secured. Their love, born in the shadows of a forbidden encounter, had not faded with time or familiarity. Instead, it had deepened, matured, becoming a quiet, unwavering current beneath the surface of their busy lives. A shared glance across a crowded hall, a gentle touch of hands during a quiet dinner, the silent understanding that passed between them when their children laughed. These were the threads that wove the tapestry of their enduring devotion. There were no grand declarations needed now, only the profound comfort of knowing that, in each other, they had found their eternal home. The bitter price paid by those who had chosen greed and betrayal was a stark lesson etched into the memory of Egypt. Amenhotep's fate, brutal and swift, served as a chilling reminder of divine justice. Prince Keti's ambition had led only to his demise, leaving a void quickly filled by a new era of diplomacy. But the true price was paid by none, for the triumph was so complete, the victory so resounding, that even the sacrifices made along the way seemed to have paved the path to an unprecedented era of peace and prosperity. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the Nile in fiery hues of gold and crimson, Nefertari and Khaemwaset often found themselves on the banks of the sacred river, their hands clasped, their hearts beating in a rhythm as old as time itself. They were no longer the young, desperate lovers of 5 years past, but pillars of a new Egypt, living legends whose story was already being woven into the very fabric of the kingdom. Their tomb paintings, a grand project commissioned years before, were already being meticulously crafted by the finest artisans, depicting them side by side, eternally young, eternally bound, destined to walk together in the serene field of reeds, where love knows no end and peace reigns supreme. Their love story, once a dangerous secret, had blossomed into a triumphant saga, whispered by storytellers and etched in hieroglyphs throughout the land. It proved that love, in its purest, most courageous form, could overcome any obstacle, transcend any social divide, and defeat the darkest forces of corruption. The gods themselves, it was said, smiled upon their union, for Nefertari and Khaemwaset had not only found their own eternal happiness, but had restored Ma'at to Egypt, forging a legacy of justice, compassion, and unity that would echo through the ages, shining as brightly as the golden sun over the blessed lands of the Nile. Their victory was not just personal, it was a victory for all of Egypt, a timeless testament to the enduring power of a love that truly conquered all. And so, dear viewer, the sands of time fall gently upon the epic tale of Princess Nefertari and Commander Khaemwaset. A story woven from courage, sacrifice, and a love so profound it dared to defy the very laws of their world. Their journey, fraught with peril and shadowed by conspiracy, stands as a timeless testament to the unbreakable spirit of the human heart. What profound lessons can we, the humble witnesses to their extraordinary saga, take from their unforgettable lives? Perhaps it is this: that true nobility isn't born of royal blood or gilded crowns, but forged in the fires of adversity, in the choices we make when faced with impossible odds. It is the unwavering courage to stand for truth, even when doing so means risking everything. It is the fierce determination to fight for justice, even against the most powerful of adversaries. And above all, it is the radiant truth that love, in its purest and most defiant form, is the most powerful force in the universe, capable of healing wounds, uniting kingdoms, and transforming destiny itself. Nefertari and Khaemwaset taught us that even in the darkest of shadows, hope can bloom, delicate and resilient, like a lotus flower on the sacred waters. They dared to dream of a world where love reigned supreme over politics, where compassion overshadowed ambition, and their unwavering faith in each other ultimately brought Ma'at, cosmic balance, back to the heart of Egypt. Their story closes, but its echoes resonate through the ages, reminding us that every life, every choice, holds the potential for an epic tale. If this journey through ancient Egypt, filled with passion, intrigue, and triumph, stirred your soul as deeply as it did ours, then I invite you to share your thoughts. What moment resonated most powerfully with you? What lesson from Nefertari and Khaemwaset's love will you carry in your own heart? Leave a comment below, and to show you journeyed with us until the very end, simply type the word Lotus. And if this tale of enduring love and defiant courage captivated your heart, know that this realm of epic romance holds many more treasures. I invite you to explore other narratives just as compelling, linked for your convenience right here in the cards above. Until our next journey together, may your own path be illuminated by courage, guided by truth, and forever blessed by the power of love.